If you've ever felt trapped in a conversation, doubting yourself after a seemingly normal interaction, or doing something against your better judgment just to appease someone, you might have been manipulated. Emotional manipulation isn't just a relationship issue. It's a masterclass in control disguised as care, support, or even love. The worst part? You often don't realize it until the damage is already done. Let's get into the honest 11 emotional manipulation tactics that can ruin lives if you don't recognize them in time. First, gaslighting. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious manipulation tactics because it targets your perception of reality. The manipulator makes you question your memory, judgment, and even your sanity. Imagine you clearly remember an argument where someone said something hurtful, but later they deny it ever happened, claiming you're overreacting or imagining things. Over time, this tactic erodes your confidence in your own mind. This term comes from the 1944 film Gaslight, where a husband manipulates his wife into thinking she's losing her sanity. It's not just in romantic relationships. Gaslighting happens at work with friends or even in family dynamics. A boss might say, "You never told me about that deadline," when you've got email proof you did. The goal? To destabilize you, making you easier to control. Gaslighting doesn't just destroy your trust in others, it destroys your trust in yourself. Victims often develop chronic anxiety and depression, questioning their own instincts and perceptions. It's not uncommon for victims to find themselves apologizing for things they didn't do or second-guessing their own decisions, all because someone else decided to warp their reality. When this happens, you're not just manipulated, you're controlled. Second, love bombing. At first glance, love bombing feels incredible. It's an overwhelming surge of affection, gifts, compliments, and attention. You think you've met someone who genuinely cares, but in reality, this is a tactic to create dependency. Once you're hooked, the manipulator withdraws the affection, leaving you desperate to regain their approval. This tactic is common in toxic relationships, particularly with narcissists. They build you up to tear you down. The unpredictability creates a psychological addiction, similar to a gambler's high. You keep chasing the love they initially gave you. Over time, you're left feeling inadequate, blaming yourself for their withdrawal. Love bombing isn't about love, it's about control. The manipulator showers you with attention not because they care, but because they want you to need them. They want you to crave their approval so deeply that you'll tolerate anything, even abuse, to keep their affection. This isn't love, it's exploitation. 3. Guilt tripping. After all I've done for you. If you've heard this line, you've likely been guilt tripped. This tactic manipulates your sense of responsibility, forcing you to prioritize the manipulator's needs over your own. It's not about mutual care, it's about control. Manipulators exploit your empathy. They position themselves as martyrs, making you feel indebted. For example, a partner might remind you of sacrifices they've made, expecting you to comply with their demands in return. Guilt tripping thrives on your fear of being seen as ungrateful or selfish. This tactic works because it preys on your sense of fairness and decency. You don't want to seem like the bad person who doesn't appreciate others, so you give in. But here's the truth. Genuine relationships don't keep score. Manipulators keep tabs on every little thing they do for you, not out of kindness, but because they intend to use it against you later. Recognize that saying no doesn't make you a bad person. Boundaries are essential, and anyone who weaponizes guilt against you doesn't truly respect you. Learn to distinguish between genuine sacrifices made out of love and calculated gestures meant to trap you in a cycle of obligation. 4. The silent treatment. The silent treatment isn't just ignoring someone, it's a calculated move to make you feel insignificant. It's a passive-aggressive punishment that leaves you anxious and desperate to make amends, even if you've done nothing wrong. Psychologically, this tactic activates the brain's rejection response. Studies show that social exclusion can trigger the same pain receptors as physical injury. The manipulator knows this and uses it to their advantage, forcing you to chase their approval. When someone gives you the silent treatment, they're not just being immature, they're asserting control. The message is clear. You're only valuable to me when you behave the way I want. It's a way of dehumanizing you, reducing your worth to your compliance with their expectations. The longer you chase their attention, the more power you give them. 5. Playing the victim. Why is everything always my fault? This classic line shifts the blame to you while portraying the manipulator as the wronged party. By positioning themselves as victims, they dodge accountability and make you feel guilty for confronting them. For example, imagine confronting a friend about their hurtful comment, only for them to say, "I'm sorry, I'm such a terrible person." Suddenly, you're apologizing to them. This tactic keeps the focus off their actions and on your perceived insensitivity. Playing the victim is a masterstroke of emotional manipulation. It's not just about avoiding blame, it's about flipping the narrative so you feel like the aggressor for even bringing up the issue. The manipulator thrives on your need to make things right, even when they're the one who's wrong. Sixth, triangulation. Triangulation brings a third party into conflicts to create division and confusion. Manipulators use it to validate their perspective, pit people against each other, or control the narrative. For example, they might say, "Even my friends think you're overreacting," to make you question your judgment while isolating you from support. This tactic thrives on secrecy and indirect communication. The third party often doesn't even realize they're being used as a pawn in the manipulator's game. The goal is to make you feel outnumbered or misunderstood, leaving you more dependent on the manipulator for validation. 7. Emotional blackmail. Emotional blackmail uses fear, obligation, and guilt to control you. Statements like, "If you loved me, you'd do this," weaponize your emotions against you. This tactic often involves implicit or explicit threats, such as withholding affection or ending the relationship. Manipulators thrive on your fear of loss and rejection. They push you into a corner, making it seem like compliance is your only way out. Over time, this creates a toxic dynamic where you feel you're constantly walking on eggshells to avoid upsetting them. Recognizing emotional blackmail is the first step to breaking free. Boundaries are your armor. Refuse to be coerced into actions that compromise your values or well-being. Remember, love is not conditional, and anyone who makes you feel otherwise is manipulating, not loving you. 8. Excessive criticism. Constant criticism is not always overtly harsh. It's often disguised as concern or helpful advice, which makes it even more insidious. Over time, it creates an environment where you're always doubting yourself. A manipulator might nitpick everything, from your appearance to your decisions, all under the guise of wanting what's best for you. Imagine a partner who says things like, "I just think you'd look better if you lost a little weight," or "That's a bold career move, but are you sure you can handle it?" While these statements seem mild, their cumulative effect is devastating. Slowly, you'll start internalizing these doubts, convincing yourself you're inadequate without their approval. 9. Overwhelming generosity. Manipulators sometimes use generosity as a weapon, but not in the way you might initially think. They often give excessively, showering you with gifts, favors, or acts of kindness that seem too good to be true. At first, this behavior feels flattering, even comforting, because it creates the illusion of care and selflessness. However, the reality is much darker. These acts of generosity are designed to make you feel obligated, indebted, and ultimately trapped into repaying them, not with more gifts, but often with your time, attention, or compliance. One of the most troubling aspects of this tactic is the subtle strings attached. These gifts become leverage, used to guilt you into doing things you wouldn't otherwise agree to. For example, a friend might constantly treat you to expensive outings and later imply that you owe them favors or loyalty in return. In romantic relationships, a partner might make significant financial gestures only to control your decisions, saying things like, "After everything I've done for you, how can you not do this for me?" Genuine generosity doesn't demand repayment, but manipulative generosity always comes with expectations. To identify and protect yourself from this tactic, observe how the giver reacts when you establish boundaries. Are they upset or withdrawn when you don't immediately reciprocate? Do they make passive-aggressive comments about your lack of gratitude? True kindness is freely given without an agenda, and understanding this distinction is essential to preserving your autonomy. Remember, you are not obligated to anyone who uses their so-called generosity as a chain to bind you to their will. 10th, projection. Projection is a psychological manipulation technique where a person deflects their own flaws, insecurities, or wrongdoings onto someone else. This isn't accidental. It's a calculated move to divert attention and responsibility. Imagine a cheating partner accusing you of being unfaithful. Their accusations aren't about you. They're an attempt to shift the spotlight away from their actions while making you doubt your integrity. This tactic thrives on confusion. When someone accuses you of traits or behaviors that aren't yours, it forces you into a defensive position. Instead of addressing their shortcomings, you're left explaining yourself for something you never did. Projection also sows seeds of doubt in your mind, leading you to wonder if you're somehow at fault or if their accusations hold merit. The manipulator's ultimate goal is to avoid accountability by turning you into the scapegoat. 11th, covert contracts. Covert contracts are perhaps one of the most subtle and confusing forms of emotional manipulation. Unlike overt agreements where terms are clearly discussed, covert contracts rely on unspoken expectations. The manipulator often performs a favor or makes a gesture of goodwill, fully intending to use it later as leverage. For example, they might pick up your slack at work or go out of their way to help with a personal issue, only to guilt you later for not reciprocating in a way they never clearly articulated. The core issue with covert contracts lies in their ambiguity. You might feel blindsided when the manipulator confronts you with statements like, "After all I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" Suddenly, you're left wondering if you've missed a critical obligation or if you've been selfish. The truth is, you never agreed to these terms in the first place. Covert contracts breed resentment not just because they're unfair, but because they create confusion and erode trust in relationships. Healthy relationships thrive on transparency and open communication. If someone expects something in return for their actions, it should be explicitly discussed. The antidote to covert contracts is clarity. When someone does something for you, thank them sincerely, but don't assume a debt you didn't agree to. Similarly, when you're the one helping others, make your intentions clear to avoid unintentionally creating your own covert contracts. Remember, mutual respect is the cornerstone of any meaningful connection, and manipulative agreements have no place in it. As Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." Protect your thoughts, protect your peace, and don't let anyone, no matter how much you care about them, convince you otherwise. Share this knowledge with someone who needs it because awareness isn't just power, it's liberation.